Hey, everybody. This is another episode of The Back Office with Dave and Jeff. We are back after a bit of a hiatus, so we're excited to get back into everything that has gone down over the past few weeks. But first, a word from our sponsor.
This episode of The Back Office is brought to you by the New York Jets organization.
J-E-T-S, Jets.
Jets.
All right.
Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much, New York Jets football organization. So a lot has gone down since we last spoke. We kind of took a hiatus because of the slide that the team was going through, which is triggered by a really rough performance on Thursday night football against the Miami Dolphins, who Dolphins appear to be a legitimate football team, but nonetheless, that was a game that kind of lost the team. Gardner looked pretty rough. He was therefore there and injured shortly after that game with a hand injury that he didn't disclose to the team. So eventually he goes on IR. We're starting Jake Luton and Mike Lennon. And the team has lost 13 games in a row. So pretty tough season. However, good news yesterday, the New York Jets, who were in the pole position for Trevor Lawrence, they somehow beat the Los Angeles Rams. Thank you, Rams. And so now the Jaguars
and Jalen
Ramsey. Jake Crowder had quite the game against you, so thank you. And so we're now in position to win the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes, and this changes everything. And it could not come at a more important point in this franchise's current status, both on the field and off the field, with a lot of things going on between the Khans and the city of Jacksonville, as far as making improvements to a Lot J entertainment project that Shad Khan is working on. And some rumors floating around that potentially, given some bad blood between the city and Shad Khan, he would be open to moving the team. The team supposedly is a free agent team, according to Mark Lamping. And so at a really upsetting moment in season for this franchise, we have now had some good news to bless us, and that is the possibility of drafting Trevor Lawrence. So, David, now that I've brought everyone back up to speed and the show is current, we probably wouldn't be talking about Justin Fields yesterday had this all not gone down. What was your initial reaction to the Jets win?
Arguably the biggest moment in Jaguars' recent history since the run in 2017. It's not every day that there's a once in a decade, maybe multi-decade type of quarterback coming into the draft. And it's even in more rarefied air when your team is in the position to take that player. So overall, a lot of excitement. Second emotion is shut it all down. Don't mess this up. Don't let Marrone and Todd Wash and Jay Gruden go out there and get some unneeded victory when there's finally light at the end of the tunnel. And that's coming from somebody that would never want to lose on purpose. But I don't see a whole lot of credence in the argument of these guys are here to to fight it out and get a win, and it's bad for the culture if you're instructing folks to lose. And I would take the complete other side of that. The culture was broken over this 13 game stretch, and all the losses we took last year, and all the losses we took before that, and the reset's coming, right? I mean, none of these guys deserve to have their jobs. I'm sure they're very nice people. But the ship has already sailed. So I think it's time to think towards the future, identify the guys that are going to be huge building blocks of the organization. Looking at you, James Robinson, DJ Chark, Josh Allen. You've got talent on the roster, albeit to compete, as we've seen over the last 13 games. Don't overthink this. It's time to let the young guys who you think may have a spot in the kind of the second, third string of the roster next year get as many reps as possible. You've seen what you have in Gardner Minshew. As painful as it is for me to say, he's not going to be the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. and likely not the starting quarterback of any NFL franchise. That said, he could be a very great backup quarterback for a very long time in the league. And so A, I think, you keep him happy. And B, I wouldn't risk, having him get injured when there's so many externalities between now and training camp. So I would play a guy like Luton or Glennon going forward. And the guys on the offensive line, I don't think Jawan Taylor should play. I don't think Cam Robinson should play. Lenders are on the defensive line. You're already playing with guys that that kind of aren't in that upper echelon from a talent perspective. I wouldn't risk it with any of the rookies, whether it's Clavon Chason or sorry, I'm blanking. But the point is, I wouldn't risk it with any of the guys that you think you can build around, going forward. So I'd shut it all down and start to build towards the future.
Yeah, and we'll get to this later in the episode. If Shad Khan decides that is his intent, that securing this draft pick is the priority for the organization, what things can you do that wouldn't be in poor taste in the NFL, so to speak, because there is this pride from players and coaches, and of course guys fighting for jobs, that you need to still exert maximum effort and considerations. And I think it's just an NFL policy at large, because once the competitive nature, once that veil is lifted and teams are doing things intentionally, then it dilutes the product. But the reason you and I and the fan base at large have this feeling of urgency about this specific issue is that because the stakes are just too high. Trevor Lawrence is a tremendous prospect. Ryan Leaf was a tremendous prospect. It's not guaranteed, although it does seem like Trevor Lawrence, just mentally and physically and in any way of evaluating him, seems to be a generational quarterback prospect. But what we're not also considering is picking at 2, just how huge the drop off is in talent, in my opinion, especially after seeing Ohio State's Justin Fields throw for less than 200 yards with a few interceptions in a huge moment. And previously in other big moments, he has failed to rise to the level of competition that he's facing. And so that it's so huge for a fan base that has suffered for so long. I hate to, because if another team was doing this, if the Jets had done this, for example, we would be so pissed. So I can understand why it's in poor taste, but yeah, you have to make the executive decision.
And I can't stress it enough. We are currently sitting in a position where, and this is going to sound crazy, but we have by far the most attractive GM and head coaching job, at least of the last 5 to 10 years, if not in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars franchise. Any team that has been around since the Jaguars were, had their inaugural season, there's never been another team that had all of these pieces in place, whether it's the multiple draft picks in each of the first.
Let me stop there. I've got it right here. We have multiple picks in the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 7th rounds. So looking at 11 draft picks in total. The second most cap space going into the NFL, which I'll pull up, but I want to say is around $90 million that we could potentially spend in free agency. We have many young pieces that we'll touch on, and then potentially Trevor Lawrence. So I'll hand the mic back to you, but
I don't think that I don't think that there's any GM or head coach or combination thereof that's out of question right now. And I heard them say it on 1010XL this morning, and I do firmly agree. If I'm Shad Khan, I'm coming out and saying, hey, I really appreciate all the hard work this year. We're going to play our young guys and see what we have to build to the future. We fully intend to take Trevor Lawrence with the number 1 overall pick. I'm going to go out and start courting my future franchise quarterback. And in the meantime, I'm calling Bill Belichick and anyone else who has proven over time to build championship winning football teams, say, hey, come to Jacksonville. We have everything you need to build a dynasty.
Wow. Did you just throw out Bill Belichick?
I did.
That was something I wanted to bring up later on, but yeah, I think that is so interesting. Maybe it's
Why stay in the cold when you come to the sun, baby?
I mean, this New England's a shit show. Yeah, they're stuck
They're in limbo.
Yeah, and being a mediocre football team in the NFL, which is limbo. So yeah, they don't have a solution at the quarterback, even though it's a pretty rich year for quarterbacks.
And Bill Belichick said it himself a week or two ago. He said, we took all of the resources, whether it's financial or human resources that we had at our disposal, and we sold out to win multiple Super Bowls. And there's nothing wrong with that. It worked. I mean, they built dynasty after dynasty over the last 20 years. But eventually, it doesn't work anymore. They're in a bad cap position. They lost their franchise quarterback to Tampa Bay in the offseason. And there's just not a whole lot of young talent to build around. They've had actually pretty bad drafts if you go and evaluate them over the last 5 years. And so who wouldn't want to change, if you're a guy like that? I don't know exactly how old Bill is. I think he's in his mid-60s, but he could coach for another 5 to 10 years. And who wouldn't want the chance to groom who could be a generational quarterback, another generational quarterback?
Yeah, he's 68 years old. Yeah, I don't know. That's really interesting. But before a head coaching decision is made, typically the steps through that process begins with appointing a general manager. And of course, Dave Caldwell was fired a few weeks ago. So we would be looking at general manager candidates, and then I presume Shad would entrust, similar to how he entrusted Dave, to hire Gus Bradley. So that brings the next question is, what kind of GM market is there out there? And like you said, I think Jacksonville's incredibly attractive. So that immediately puts us in the conversation with any top tier candidate. So, I mean, neither of us can sit here and, endorse probably one candidate or the other. We could act like we know, but there are a number of interesting candidates out there. Did you have anybody in mind in particular that you were eyeing?
I don't have anyone in particular. I'd love to hear if you do. But what I'd say is, nothing against the Dave Caldwell hire originally. I mean, I think that the thought process was there. I mean, he was under the tutelage of Bill Polian for a long time. He helped Thomas Dimitroff craft a really great Atlanta Falcons organization that went on a championship run. And, we bought what we thought was a rising star, and it didn't work out. And, that happens. Nothing, especially in the NFL, is going to be a for sure. But I wouldn't abandon that playbook and try and get cute and go after somebody that nobody's heard of, which seems to be our MO in some regards with some hires. I would stick with, the teams that you've seen in the playoffs on a perennial basis over the last 5 years. Go get those guys, get the number 2s, the number 3 guys in those respective front offices, and give them the opportunity to come in and take over what is right now a beat up Buick and see if they can turn it into a Porsche, because there's no reason why they can't. They have all the resources at their disposal, as we already talked about. We just need somebody that knows what it takes to build a championship football team year in, year out, not, get too cute, outsmart yourself. And bring in the right people around them. And I think that that's really the part where we've failed. And I don't know if you can throw all of it on Dave Caldwell or Shad. I mean, I personally think, it's the owner's responsibility to handle these things. I think he's handled them pretty poorly over the last 10 years. But, find somebody that's a natural leader that can go out and attract people that want to be here, that want to win a lot of football games, and have the resumes to back it up. Because we don't have that right now. If you look anywhere around the front office or our coaching staff, there's no one that I think you could get on a table and say, I would throw myself on the train tracks to keep this guy in the organization. There's not a single person like that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, you made a good point. I think you need somebody who comes from an organization that has just year in and year out built solid rosters. Some teams that come to mind who consistently do that: the Steelers, the
Chiefs,
Kansas City Chiefs, the Bills, even the Colts have put together a really strong team, even despite the Andrew Luck fiasco. But considering the position that we're in now, and presumably if we lose the next 2 games, we will have the first pick and quarterback set in stone, undoubtedly. So I think you can look for a GM that isn't as touted as a quarterback evaluator, and maybe somebody who's a better pro evaluator, since we do have $80 million to spend. We need to make some smart decisions in free agency. And specifically a defensive evaluator, because the offensive side of the ball is certainly more built than where the defense is at. And so there's some general thoughts. If I'm not going to pretend like I would be able to make this decision, but I really like the Mike Borgonzi guy out of Kansas City. It's just a good organization. But Ed Dodds is a guy who he is the number 2 guy at Indianapolis, and I know some of our guys will vouch for him, or they seem to be attracted to him. But that'll be an interesting decision. It'll be very interesting to see what Shad Khan does. But
agreed. Yeah, I think you made a great point, and I just reinforce it. And I think we already touched on this a little bit, but you don't need an expert quarterback evaluator. This is the easiest pick of all time, assuming, knock on every piece of wood that I can touch here, that you lose out these next 2 games. I'd go public with it immediately and say, we're taking Trevor Lawrence at 1, and we're going to go out and find a GM
flock,
that can take us to the promised
flock
land.
to Jacksonville. Come on.
Right? I mean, like, I don't think there's any downside in doing that. I mean, go and start courting him as soon as the college football playoffs are over, and make sure he's comfortable with it. It's a great fit, and it's on autopilot, so you can't mess it up. Don't do anything. Go out and say we're taking from them, and then figure out the rest. I just think, like you said, spend your efforts elsewhere. Find somebody that knows how to rebuild the defense. I mean, it is just a total shambles from what was just a dominant defense in 2017. It's shocking how quickly you could decompose something that was such a strength, not just in Jacksonville, but viewed as such across the entire league.
Although I will say, throughout this slide of losses, we have lost in style or lost pretty a couple times. The Texans game was a 2-point game. The Packers game was 4. The Vikings went into overtime. The Browns came down to the last plays. So considering that we've put guys like C.J. Henderson and Josh Allen on IR, and we've been playing with a skeleton crew, a guy like Devon Hamilton, who was our best defensive lineman, was hurt. Fortunately, not a serious injury, but he's also on IR. So, we've sent a lot of guys to IR, and I think the defense has shown some resiliency. But certainly for a championship roster caliber defense, you're looking at, you need another, 6 or 7 starters or quality players.
Yeah. And I know we're going to get into personnel more as we go, so I don't want to jump the gun on that. But but I hear you, and I don't disagree. There are some bright spots, like a guy like Sidney Jones coming out of nowhere as a free agent acquisition, could potentially be a starting quarterback next year. That's exciting. That said, am I going back to what we already talked about? If I'm them, there's no way I'm letting Miles Jack take a snap next week. We're in week 17. I'm kind of iffy on Schobert. I think you and I differ on that a little bit. I'd probably shut him down too. I'd bring in Shaq Quarterman and see what you got as a guy at middle linebacker.
Love that.
Anyway, so that was a little bit of a tangent, but yes, you're right. I think there are some bright spots on the defense, and we can get into personnel more in a few minutes.
As far as a head coach, what would you be looking for in a head coach if you were the GM?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the league has really shifted. Can't give an exact timeline, but it's a scoring league right now. Nothing against Doug, but he never really struck you as some kind of offensive genius. I think we need to go out and find somebody that can maximize the most out of Lawrence, not just as like a rookie and I'll call him an infant quarterback over the first 1 or 2 years, but really somebody that can build an offense around his strengths, which he
Mhm.
seemingly has lots of, and then bring in a defensive coordinator that is not so stuck in his own scheme. It's somebody that can take an honest, hard look at what we've got and work with the GM to build around that core going forward and figure out a defense that fits the personnel that we have on the roster right now and that we have ready access to in the draft and free agency.
Mhm.
So I would really start with the offense from the head coaching spot, and then focus, as your kind of core complementary coordinator. I would focus more on defense and offense. So I'd really want a head coach that has an offensive coordinating background, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I think that that's where the future of the league is. So, the first few names that come to mind: Joe Brady out of Carolina, real young guy. Eric Bieniemy, I think that's how you say it.
Yep.
He is the OC at Kansas City. He's been talked about a ton. Some people wonder if, is it really the Andy Reid show and he's just along for the ride, or what the
Yep.
situation is there. Bill Belichick is a wild name to throw out there. Defensive oriented, of course, but still interesting. And then Josh McDaniels has always been in the conversation year over
Yep.
year. So, anyways,
But
I think, and to your point, obviously the league is on notice if you secure that pick that you're getting Trevor Lawrence. You see who comes to you, who is just absolutely thrilled to work with him, and make sure it's the right marriage. Go ahead.
yeah, totally. I was going to ask, do you seriously consider trying to pull Dabo out of Clemson?
No,
And
no, I don't think
I've heard
so.
it a bunch on the radio.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be able to. It's a popular thing to connect dots there, but I just don't think that I think Dabo's strength is the recruiting and relationships with college players, and it's a totally different dynamic in the pros. And a college coach needs to be like a father to those kids, and in the pros, it's a business. So two totally different styles, and I think I don't know anything about his X's and O's, but he's never struck me as like a mastermind or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I definitely tend to agree.
And yeah, I don't know if I would go to the college ranks for. I think there's enough young guys in the NFL that you can pluck who have already been around for a while. Because if Trevor Lawrence is on the roster, with the amount of money that we have to spend to bolster and improve the defense, I think we're immediately a playoff. We're sniffing playoffs immediately.
Yeah,
How big of an impact a guy like him can have, especially compared to what we've had, between the last number of quarterbacks.
yeah, I think you're right. And you tell me if you want to segue over to personnel groups. I know we're going to touch on some as kind of
Yeah,
a first part in a multi-part series, but yeah, no, I think if you can, if you're able to secure Trevor Lawrence and you're able to bolster the offensive line, and you can add a high quality tight end, maybe a Kyle Pitts, which would be unbelievable in the draft. I think you have an offense that can easily carry you into the playoffs, at least as a wild card. Even in a division that has the Colts and the Titans, who are playing really, really good football deep in the year right now, respectively. And I think you can put enough of your cap space, at least over kind of the short term, 2 to 3 year type deal, into the defense through free agency, to have enough there to get you into the playoffs. So yeah, totally agree.
Talking about personnel, we'll go through this really quickly. But just some guys that you've been impressed with so far this season, or and want to continue to keep an eye on these next two games. We've got Chicago on Sunday and the Colts the Sunday following. Who has stood out for you over the stretch, and guys that you
on the roster, you mean? Oh, like on the Jags roster?
Yeah,
Okay.
current.
Yeah. Okay, so guys that have stood out this year, as we mentioned earlier, there's some folks that have already moved to IR, but I'm going to include them for the sake of this conversation.
Okay.
Starting on the offensive side of the ball, though, I think that Keelan Cole has made a real argument for himself to be on this roster next year. Though I'd caveat that by saying it's got to come at the right price for the team. I think there's a lot of talent at that wide receiver position between DJ Chark, Laviska Shenault, and I really think an emerging star in Colin Johnson. And so I think you really only need one more guy, right? I don't think there's a spot for Chris Conley on this roster next year. I don't think there's a spot for Dede Westbrook, even though he's already on IR given the significant knee injury that he incurred. But if you can lock up Keelan on a fairly team-friendly deal and just say, hey, this position group is fairly done, I'm all about that. I think that would be great. So he's a real standout to me. The biggest standout of all, of course, is James Robinson, right? It goes without saying, like a guy to come in undrafted and do what he did over the course of the season behind a good offensive line, but not the best offensive line on a team that wasn't always in a position to be running the ball is pretty incredible. And so I think you have a true building block there. I think the best thing that you could do for him in the offseason beyond just adding to the offensive line is to get him a complimentary back to spell him a little bit. I mean, that guy is always on the field. On third down, he's either taking on a linebacker, in the backfield to block, or he's out on the flat catching the ball and hurdling a guy. He's super well conditioned, obviously, to be able to do all that stuff. But you need to get him some help. But as far as stars go, I mean, he's the obvious one. On the offensive line, I've liked what I've seen out of both Cam Robinson and Juwan Taylor as kind of our young tackles. I think the key question of the offseason is going to be, do you extend Cam Robinson? You've got 2 more years with Juwan Taylor until you really have to make that call. So he's the right tackle for now, and he needs to get better. It's not like he had a Pro Bowl season by any stretch, but
he has actually allowed the most pressures in the NFL.
Yeah, which isn't great. And then with Cam, if push came to shove, I think I'm okay. Walking away from that one. The big question is, who do you replace him with? And I did pull up the free agent tracker to see if there were any notable left tackles.
And I agree with you. I would go to the market. I love Cam Robinson. He seems like a hilarious dude. I would love to hang out with him. I don't trust him with a bag of money and counting on him to take the next step. This was his contract year. This is the best that he had. I would prefer to go to the market.
Yeah, I agree. The problem is, based on the look of things, you have a couple high quality left tackles that are out there. Unfortunately, they're all kind of on the older side. So you've got Alejandro Villanueva, who's there. You've got Trent Williams, who's there. You've got Russell Okung, who's there. But you don't have anybody that you can really plan on for a long period of time. All those guys are between 32 and 33 years old. I don't know how old they'll be when they start next season. So it's a tough year to be in the market for left tackle unless I'm missing anybody.
Yeah, maybe we can find a situation where there's a cap casualty and we can send a pick for somebody on draft day. You have to secure the line as best you can for Lawrence, just for his own mental sake. So
I agree. I think that's a big priority in the offseason is finding an anchor at left tackle. And I mean, if you could get one of those guys on a 2-year deal that doesn't just crush you from a cap perspective, I think it's worth it to ensure a smooth transition for Lawrence into the NFL.
Oh, we got money to burn, baby.
So we've touched a little bit on offensive line. I think you do still need to get better at the guard position.
I got some stuff on the guards for you. AJ Cann is in his second or third year of that contract. He's serviceable. That's great. Andrew Norwell has surprisingly had a exceptional pass blocking year. Not so great on the run blocking, but pass blocking. Seeing a lot of people giving him props for that. I'm sure this next year of his contract, this will be the 4th year. We had 18, 19, 20. So yeah, it'll be the 4th year of his contract. So it's going to get pretty pricey. Maybe we can renegotiate it. That'd be really cool. Ben Barch has seen some playing time since Norwell has been hurt. Ben Barch actually looks pretty good. He was the Division III guy that
Yep.
we drafted. So
and more of a fit on the inside. And they also tried him. It seemed like a little bit at tackle at points during training camp. But I think his natural fit is definitely at the guard spot.
Yep. I think Tyler Shatley's been playing center since Brandon Linder has been on IR.
Talk about a guy to renew as a swing player on that offensive line. You know, the fact that we over the years have had so many injuries there, and he's seemingly always plugged in and not been noticed at either center, right guard, or left guard. That's exactly what you want in a backup offensive lineman. So I'm all for giving Shatley some more moolah in the offseason.
Yeah,
keep him around.
I'm down for Linder too. He's like our Brad Meester of our heyday. So I'm cool with Linder, but and it seems like what they preached about like keeping this unit together has been good for them. I thought when they were all together and healthy and playing competitive football that they looked all right, but I don't think Gardner helped them a lot at times, which is like so disappointing. Gardner had a chance to take his moment, and I don't know if it seemed like he regressed a little bit. I was a little disappointed that he didn't use his legs on scrambles and rollouts. He seems to want to run at the midnight hour when things are already
breaking down.
So, but we'll keep rolling through this, the future of the roster, essentially. I'll touch on some defensive stuff. Miles Jack has had a great year at outside linebacker, the will linebacker spot. Finally he got a chance to start there full time. Look what happened. So it seems like that signing isn't going to blow up in our face like we kind of worried it would. Shout out Yannick Ngakoue. He had a trash season, so that was been rewarding. Back to the Jaguars, Devon Hamilton, like I said earlier, looked really, really great as a pass rusher and run defender until he got hurt. He'll be back and strong next year. Caleb Chason is a guy who struggled early on. He was a raw project player out of LSU, pass rusher. Some people think he would do better in a 3-4 system. Lately, we've been giving him the chance to rush standing up. So had a really slow start to the season. I mean, like games where he didn't even register statistics. But he has grown a lot the past couple of weeks. He had like 10 pressures last game, which is amazing. So he looks like the game's slowing down a little bit for him. Sidney Jones, to your point, free agent pickup, former first-round pick. He's had a great season. Josh Jones is the strong safety that we had. He had an interception against Lamar Jackson. He's probably a depth guy. You'd like to have a playmaker. You'd like to have two playmakers at safety, but we'll see what they end up doing with him. I think J. Rod Wilson is clearly a depth player. Trey Herndon had a chance to assume a starting role this year, didn't do it.
I'd say at the safety position, who knows if he'll actually get to market, but if Justin Simmons is there in the offseason from Denver, I think you pay him and you never look back. That guy's just a freak. And would just totally change the dynamic of that backfield. And then the other point I was going to make is, and then I'll let you keep going, is it's been shocking to see how much Taven Bryan has fizzled out since being the 24th pick in the draft 2 or 3 years ago to today. And it's on the old front office, but just totally unforgivable of like how bad that has worked out. And just means that you got to go back to the well again and get another interior defensive lineman to pair with Devon Hamilton, whether you're running a 3-4 or 4-3. I mean, we just don't have the depth on the inside. So
yeah, that is really disappointing. He's been playing like a total of like 16 snaps a game recently. We're not going to be exercising that 5th-year option. Looking up Dawuane Smoot's stats, he's got 5.5 sacks this year. So he's a guy I also thought was kind of a goofball that just never seemed like he played to what he was capable of doing. But he's had a a sneaky good year this year, so we'll see what they do with them. But like you said, need to bring in a defensive coordinator that is flexible with the scheme, or I guess you just attract defensive coordinators and hear what their thoughts are for how you would reshape this roster. And you need a general manager that understands the strengths of this upcoming draft, and maybe that guides your decision a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I don't think as saddened as I am by the defense this year. I mean, they're clearly pieces, and we've talked about a bunch of them that you can build around. So I really do think it just takes, a new system, a new guy in charge to kickstart this. I don't think that they're so far behind that they can't get back within a season or two on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
But you do need to add players pretty much at every level of the defense just to be competitive. So it'll be interesting, and luckily they have a ton of picks. So, you try to build through the draft and get it done that way, as well as, spending a ton of money probably this offseason specifically on the defense. But you're going to have to also invest in the draft because those guys are going to cycle out over the next 2 or 3 years, whoever you sign this offseason.
Yeah. If I'm the GM, I am probably still placing a little bit more emphasis on the offense, as far as my theory with defenses is that you can push your chips in and build a good defense by spending money
when necessary. Yep.
And that's the last thing that you do, in my opinion, is get the defense ready. But you need to breed this offensive system that's going to become its own thing. Find the right players for that system, so that by year 2 or 3, it is something like what Sean Payton has built and what Belichick and Brady had, just an elite offensive system, and then you can figure out the defense. But in any case, let's transition to one of our last segments. I thought that was really good to kind of bring people up to speed of who we've been impressed with so far this year. We still have a lot more off-season stuff to go over in future episodes, but back to the Jaguars game on Sunday and the game after, 2 more games left in the season. If you were Shad Khan and you needed to engineer 2 losses, what are you doing to ensure that happens within reason, like realistically, but without creating an investigation by the NFL?
All right. Well, I'll start on the football side of things. I think that we've already hit on this. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I would 100% not play Gardner at quarterback. I personally would put in Jake Luton.
Right.
I would sub out both of your starting offensive tackles. If that means you have Ben Bartch play on one side and you have Will Richardson play on the other, that's fine. I think
under the guise of that you just want to evaluate talent.
Yeah, that you want to see what you got in on the depth, with your depth players. At wide receiver, I would most likely, start Colin Johnson on the outside. And I think there's a good reason to see what he can do as kind of the primary guy in a game. I would definitely take out Laviska Shenault. Like, that guy is the most physical ball carrier at the wide receiver position that I think I've ever seen. And all you need is for him to take on more contact in one of these games and get really hurt before going into next year. I'd also shut down DJ Chark, again, under the guise of, we're trying to see what we got behind us. I don't really think there's a whole lot that you need to do on defense to ensure that they're going to give up 25 or 30 points. They've been doing that pretty much all season. You just don't want to match firepower on the offensive side of the ball and stay in these games. The one player that we already hit on, though, is Miles Jack cannot play another snap this season.
Yeah, he's the only guy I would worry about making like a pick 6 to win a stupid game.
Yeah. And then on the non-football side of things, I don't know how much you can really do with the coaching staff and all that. I mean, they're fighting for their livelihoods at the moment. People say that a lot too, and like the reality is, you're 1-13. I don't know what 2 additional wins really does for that coaching resume. But I think I would have a sit down and have an honest conversation around, hey, when in doubt, play the young guy. Like let's get everybody that we think might have a spot on this roster in the future, um, more reps, and in the meantime, consider that me evaluating, if there's a potential spot for you going forward, if I'm Shad Khan, and I would leave it at that because I don't think you can really tell them, hey, shut everybody down. You can't be as explicit, but I would just say, when in doubt, play the young guy. And here's 5 guys that can't get hurt going into next season.
Yeah, I think that's all reasonable. I think I would like say that I'm not going to announce a starter until later in the week, starting quarterback. Don't give Jake Luton 1 practice rep with the ones.
That's a great point.
And then on Friday night you say, oh, by the way, Jake Luton's starting. And then I don't know, whoever you have in your pocket. I don't know if you can get the coordinators in on it. I think that's the easiest way to do it without like just blatantly putting guys on IR or having like a COVID outbreak or whatever could transpire, because the internet's just gonna like tear you apart. But if you go out there and you get Todd Wash to run base defense every single play and just not deviate from it and put guys in positions where they're mismatched. So I think if I'm going to go full conspiracy theorist, that's how I would do it, is I would have the coordinators in on it somehow, because you can't fault a guy for calling bad plays. But in any case, I wish that there was a way that we could just guarantee these next 2 losses, because it's going to be I might quit the NFL altogether if we win a game.
I agree. The thing I'd add though is that in a lot of ways I think it takes care of itself. The Bears are 7-7 right now. They're trying to get in the playoffs. Between Allen Robinson on a comeback revenge tour, and Montgomery at running back, who put up a crazy weekend this last weekend. I think they've got the offense to outscore us even on a good day with Gardner playing and let alone with Luton playing. I think that takes care of itself. And the Colts are in the hunt to win the division, not just get into the wild card. So they're going to be out for blood in week 17. And I just think, going back all the way to the Gus Bradley era, maybe even the Malarkey era, this is by far the worst accumulation of talent the Jags have had. And when you don't have a lot of talent, it seems to take care of itself. So that's what I would say. I mean, I think that those 2012, 2013 Gus Bradley teams were atrocious, and this team is arguably worse from a talent perspective. So I think especially if you remove some certain players like a James Robinson from the equation, there's no way that this is happening. And I'm still knocking on serious wood over here, but that's what I think.
Yeah, it is interesting to compare this team to those 12 and 13 teams. At least in those teams, though, we had veteran free agents that could hold down at least like to manage a spot. So I think from a competence level, we are certainly worse. From a talent perspective, I think we have bright spots that far exceed the talent that were on those teams. And I think I'd rather be in that situation because we haven't gone to the well yet of free agency. As last season, we just, shed any unnecessary cap that we could. But we're going to get into a ton of the offseason. Today was a lot about kind of recapping the previous 10 weeks or so and the Trevor Lawrence news. And we'll get into more analysis of Trevor Lawrence because, frankly, I was so dug in for the number 2 pick. And I went live on the Instagram during the Ohio State game, and Justin Fields just looked totally incompetent. And I was already like researching Zach Wilson at BYU. And so I'm very thankful, but now I got to do some homework on Trevor Lawrence, although he looked like an absolute stud on Saturday.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's great that we got the opportunity to kind of hit the reset button and shift to our historically our favorite time of the year, which was draft and free agency talk. I've got a feeling if things go the way they should over the next couple of weeks, draft and free agency might not be the highlight of our Jaguar season for all that much longer, which would be very refreshing. The last plug I'll make, and then maybe a little closing statement would be, thank you, Frank Gore. Thank you, the Jets putter, for saving that tackle at the end of that game.
Put him in the pride.
Yeah, put him in the pride. Duval is very, very grateful. And if I'm Shotgun, you have landed ass backwards in the best situation that any NFL owner could possibly wind up in. You've got a guy that should be a generational quarterback. Do the right stuff. Go invest behind him. Don't make stupid hires over the next couple of weeks. Don't listen to your son with the stupid analytics and shit. Go get somebody that knows football, and let's go build dynasties.
I'm with you. Let's. It shouldn't be that hard. There's so many great candidates, but and that should be really the easy part. We'll see how it all plays out. Hopefully, we'll have some fun stuff to talk about next episode. But otherwise, those are my closing thoughts. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of The Back Office. And with Dave and Jeff, go Jags. Duval.
Let's do it, baby. Lawrence 21.